Shelter in place. You hear that phrase, and I don't know, it just triggers something, right? You immediately think of 2020.
Oh, absolutely. Sourdough starters, Zoom calls, that feeling that the danger is out there.
Exactly. A virus, a storm, whatever. And safety is inside, behind your own front door. Your home is, the one safe place.
But the sources we're digging into today, and we've got a pile of them, local reporting from the Sahan Journal, some deep demographic data, even activist threads, they take that whole idea and just turn it completely inside out.
We're doing a deep dive into the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, and St. Paul right now, February 2026. And the thing that's forcing people to shelter in place, it isn't a virus. It's something called Operation Metro Surge.
And we really need to get the scale of this. The DHS reports are pretty clear on this point. This is not just a typical enforcement action. They're calling it the largest in American history.
That's huge. What are the numbers?
2,000 federal agents. A mix of IC and Customs and Border Protection have been deployed specifically into the Twin Cities. It's a militarized presence in a major American city.
But, and this is really why we wanted to tackle this, we're not just going to rehash the headlines of arrests and protests. We want to look at how this operation is colliding with something, I think, much more basic. We're talking about housing.
Yeah, because you can't really understand what 2,000 agents on the street means if you don't understand the pre-existing conditions behind the doors they're knocking on.
The sources paint this picture of a really fragile housing ecosystem. You've got these systemic barriers already in place, things like credit scores or even religious beliefs that were already squeezing the Hmong, Somali, and Latino communities.
And then you just drop this massive federal operation right on top of it. So the mission for us today is to unpack how that collision turns the very simple act of staying home into this desperate, high-stakes survival strategy.
Okay, so let's start there. With that pre-existing condition, before any of this started, what was the reality for immigrant households trying to find a place to live in the Twin Cities?
It was already pretty precarious. We have some baseline data here from a few years back, but it sets the stage, showing that nearly 40% of immigrant households were already cost-burdened.
And cost burden, just so we're all on the same page, that's not just rent is a little high. That means you're spending over 30% of your income just to keep a roof over your head.
Exactly. And for many of the people in these reports, it's a lot closer to 50%. 50. And when you're at that level, you have zero margin for error.
You're not saving, you're just surviving.
You're one missed shift away from disaster. And that's just the money side. What I found really fascinating in the demographic notes is how these barriers are different for each community. It's not one size fits all.
Right. The challenges for a Hmong family are completely different than for a Somali family.
Take the Hmong community. The Twin Cities has one of the largest Hmong populations in the country. But their sort of family structure often clashes with the standard American apartment.
You mean multi-generational households?
Right. You've got this cultural preference for having, 6, 7, 8 people under one roof, grandparents, parents, kids. That's your support system.
But the apartment stock in Minneapolis is mostly 1 and 2 bedrooms.
It's a square peg in a round hole.
Yeah.
So you immediately run into issues of overcrowding by city codes, which puts you at risk. But there's also the financial piece. A lot of families operate in a cash economy.
Which means no credit history. Your credit invisible.
And if you're invisible to the credit bureaus, you can't get a traditional mortgage. You can't even get a prime lease. You're pushed into this subprime rental market where landlords might not run a credit check, but they charge you a whole lot more for the privilege.
And that leads right into what the sources were saying about the Latino community. They used a phrase that just, wow, it really jumped out at me. Predatory inclusion.
That's a brutal phrase, isn't it?
It sounds like it can't be real.
But it describes a very real business model. It's where landlords specifically seek out undocumented tenants because they're vulnerable. They'll rent them apartments with, lead paint, infestations, no heat.
Knowing that they can't complain, because if you complain to the city, the landlord threatens to call ICE.
Precisely. The fear of deportation becomes a tool. It's leverage. The landlord gets to charge market rates for slum conditions.
Okay, so then you have the Somali community. And for me, this was the biggest light bulb moment in all the research. The main barrier wasn't credit, it was theology.
It's all about riba.
The Islamic prohibition on paying or receiving interest.
Yeah, and just stop and think what that means in an American context. The entire machine of American middle-class wealth building is built on one thing, the 30-year interest-bearing mortgage.
That's how you build equity.
But if your faith forbids you from participating in that system, you're locked out. You have these incredibly hardworking families contributing to the economy, but they're stuck in a permanent cycle of renting. Halal mortgages exist, but they're incredibly hard to find.
So they're just locked out of building wealth, and they're often in apartments that don't even really fit their cultural needs, like for gender separation.
So that's the landscape. Before Operation Metro Surge even begins, you have these communities that are financially stretched in housing that's either too small or unsafe and locked out of homeownership. The foundation has cracks all over it.
And then, December 2025, the agents arrive, and everything shifts from this is hard to this is terrifying.
This is when shelter in place becomes literal. The reporting from late January 2026 describes basically a city grinding to a halt.
The root cause seems so simple. People were just too afraid to go to work.
Of course. If you're undocumented, or even if you just live with someone who is, every trip outside is a risk calculation. Is there a checkpoint on the highway? Will they be waiting at the bus stop?
I saw that one quote from a woman in the Sahan Journal. She just said, "I can't leave. I can't work. I am absolutely filled with worry."
And just connect that back to the housing data. These are the households that are already cost burdened. If you're an hourly worker, and most are, when you don't work, you don't get paid. Period.
And if you don't get paid, you can't pay rent.
They happen so fast, it's a spiral. The sources say that within 2 weeks, families were already through their savings and getting eviction notices.
This is the eviction bomb the activists keep talking about.
Right, because in normal times, an eviction is awful. You lose your home. But in this specific context, an eviction is basically a pipeline to deportation.
Because if you're forced out of your apartment,
You're in the open. You have no walls. The home is the only thing providing cover, providing invisibility. If you lose your home, you're completely exposed.
what's really chilling, though, is that even the home wasn't always a safe space. I'm reading these reports about landlords actually working with the agents.
This is a huge part of it. Usually, the main door to an apartment building is locked. That's the first line of defense. But we're seeing multiple reports of building managers just buzzing federal agents right in, giving them access codes.
So the perimeter is just gone.
Which means the deadbolt on your own apartment door becomes the absolute final barrier. Activists talk about it not as a piece of hardware, but as the only thing standing between keeping your family together and having it torn apart.
That has to change your entire psychology of living. And it's hitting the kids, too.
Oh, the school data is just heartbreaking. Fridley Public Schools reported that attendance dropped by almost a third.
A third. That's not just a few kids staying home. That's a system failure.
It is. Minneapolis and St. Paul schools had to pivot back to optional distance learning.
So, back to Zoom school.
But not because of a pandemic. Because parents were terrified. Terrified that if they dropped their kids off in the morning, they might get picked up by ICE before they could come get them in the afternoon.
And there was that one story, I had to read it a couple of times, the one about the 5-year-old child.
Yeah, that one's tough. The allegation from school officials was that agents detained a 5-year-old child and essentially used the kid as bait, waiting for the undocumented parents to show up to claim them.
When a story like that gets out, true or not, it just creates this climate of pure terror.
Yeah.
It tells parents that nowhere is safe, only inside.
So you stay inside, you run out of money, rent is due. Which brings us to the political stalemate. Because normally in a massive crisis like this, the government is supposed to provide a safety net.
Right, like in 2020, Governor Tim Walz issued an eviction moratorium. He said, no one should lose their home during an emergency.
He has that power. He could do it again. But this time, nothing.
But why? There are over 70 organizations, the city council, all begging him to act.
Well, it's the politics, isn't it? In 2020, the enemy was a virus. Easy to be against a virus. Now, the force of nature is federal law enforcement. For a governor to actively block evictions to shield people from federal agents, that's a much more difficult political calculation.
So he's not acting, and the Minneapolis City Council, they tried to do something.
They did. They approved $1 million in rental assistance.
Which sounds like a lot until you realize how many people need it.
Exactly. Even the council members admitted it was a drop in the bucket. That kind of money helps maybe 250 families for a month. It was gone in hours.
And Mayor Frey, the sources seem pretty critical of him.
Yeah, they paint a picture of a mayor caught between his progressive base and his ties to landlords and developers. He actually refused to sign the moratorium resolution that the council passed.
So total gridlock. The governor won't act, the mayor won't act, and the city council wants to, but doesn't have the funds.
And in the meantime, the first of the month comes and goes. The eviction notices go up. And that bomb just keeps ticking.
It all sounds so bleak. You read this, and it feels like this unstoppable machine. But, and I want to shift here, the sources also describe this incredible organized resistance.
Yes. And it's not just protests. This is infrastructure.
The sources make a really clear distinction between what they call charity and mutual aid.
It's a crucial point. Charity is top-down. I have something, you need it, I give it to you. Mutual aid is horizontal. It's neighbors saying, we are all in this together, and my survival is tied to your survival.
We protect us.
That's it. And with the government largely absent, the community had to step into that void.
I think the wildest example for me was the Needle and Skein project. I was not expecting to find knitting in the middle of all this.
The craftivists. They're a powerful force. This group launched a project called Melt the Ice. They designed and sold knitting patterns for hats and donated all the proceeds.
And it wasn't a small amount of money.
Not at all. They raised over $600,000.
$600,000 from knitting patterns. That's unbelievable.
It just shows you how broad the support was. And then you had things like the rent challenge popping up on social media.
Right, kind of like that old ice bucket challenge, but for rent.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Families would post their need, and neighbors would just start sending money. One source said 43 families got their entire rent covered in the first 12 hours.
That's the speed of mutual aid. It takes the city weeks to debate $1 million. Neighbors just did it.
But money's only one part of the problem. If you can't leave your house, rent money doesn't put food on the table.
So you saw these logistics networks form.
The South Minneapolis Tenants Union is a perfect example. They shifted from just being a tenants union to being like a crisis response unit. They organized grocery deliveries, prescription pickups. They were the supply lines.
And they were also providing physical protection. Tell me about the spiritual shields.
It's such a powerful image. You had clergy imams, priests, rabbis, literally putting their bodies in front of apartment doors.
Using their religious authority as a shield.
Exactly. They were betting that federal agents wouldn't want the visual of manhandling a priest to get to a family. They were using their moral authority as a physical barrier.
And then there's the Monarca Rapid Response Line. That sounded like a high-tech neighborhood watch.
It's a community surveillance network. But they're not watching for burglars, they're watching for icy. Someone spots an unmarked van, they text a hotline, and a blast goes out to the whole network. Agent spotted at 34th in Chicago. Stay away.
It gives people a way to navigate a dangerous landscape.
It gives them back a tiny piece of control in a situation where they have none.
The one detail from all this that really it grounded the whole thing for me was the coat drive.
Yeah, that one is chilling.
I mean, this is February in Minnesota. It's dangerously, life-threateningly cold.
And reports were coming out that when people were being released from detention, sometimes late at night, they were being let go without the winter codes they were arrested in.
Which is basically a death sentence if it's 10 below zero.
So the community mobilized. They collected thousands of coats and kept them staged near the detention centers, ready for anyone who was released. It's such a stark reminder of the stakes.
So when we step all the way back and you look at this whole picture, the broken housing market, the federal surge, the political inaction, and this incredible community response, what's the real takeaway here? What are we seeing?
I think what we're seeing is the redefinition of the word home.
How do you mean?
Well, we tend to think of housing as an investment, an asset, or, just a roof over your head. But what happened in the Twin Cities turned housing into the primary battlefield for civil rights.
A front door became the front line.
Exactly. The system was already designed to keep people out with things like credit scores and interest rates.
Yeah.
But then the surge came and weaponized that system. It trafficked people inside those very homes.
And the government, which is supposed to protect the privacy of the home, was actively working to breach it.
It forces you to ask a really uncomfortable question. If the only thing standing between a family staying together and being torn apart is a single deadbolt, and the government is actively trying to get past that deadbolt, what does the idea of a private home even mean anymore for those communities?
It makes privacy sound like a luxury.
That's the takeaway that haunts you. For some people, a home is a sanctuary. For others, it's just a temporary hiding place. And the difference between the two is a piece of paper.
That is a heavy thought. It definitely makes you look at your own front door a little differently.
It's more than just a lock. For thousands of people, it was the only thing they had left.
That's our deep dive for today. A truly complex and difficult situation, but also a story of incredible resilience. Thanks for listening.